Hello, everybody. This is Architecture Talk Tank with Sarah Colada. Very excited for today. We are streaming in really strange time zones. I'm in Bali, so this is super early in the morning for me. And we also have LA and New York, right? Tuning in, yeah, in late hours of the evening, the day before for me. So I
You're in the
really hope
future.
that whoever watches that, if live, great. You probably are in similar time zones, and if not, you'll be watching that tomorrow throughout the day. Content lives on, and that's a great thing about that.
It absolutely does.
So today we're going to talk about all things out of architecture, which is a very important topic. It's also gathering a lot of pain points, I think, for the industry and for people that are actually transitioning. But it's very rewarding, I must say. I went through that myself, and I'm really excited for the conversation today. But before we dive into this, I just want to mention that the Startup Symposium is coming up, guys, less than 5 days from now. If you haven't yet, go and get your tickets at disruptsymposium.com. We have Grimshaw, Maze, HKAce, HOK, UN Studio, Architectonics coming to speak to you about their practice operations and success in architecture, what makes them successful, trace of thoughts about how to set up a business and different strategies for marketing. We also are bringing to stage a lot of topics of design technology and BIM, hosting various associates, partners, and directors of BIM and technology at this edition. So if you are interested in these topics, this edition is for you. And we'll also touch on the topic of metaverse and setting up your projects in the metaverse with Dewan architects and engineers that's already been delivering projects like that out of Saudi Arabia. So on that note, let's deep dive into this episode. I've got Jake Rudin and Erin Pellegrino with me, who are from Out of Architecture, an incredible project which basically unpacks topics of whatever happens after you leave architecture, and also talks about how architecture best prepares us for that step. So, Jake and Erin, welcome to Architecture Talk Tank. How are you doing today?
Doing very well, thank you. Very excited to be here, and the Disrupt Symposium sounds amazing. So I'm hoping everyone else wants to join. I certainly do.
And you did it all in one breath, which was really impressive. Yeah,
I do have a talent for that. When we are preparing Disrupt and I get on stage, we do some B-rolls and sometimes record stuff in pre-record. And the team is like, okay, Sarah, stop, take a breath. Something to me. Anyway, so Out of Architecture, tell us a little bit about the project.
Well, Out of Architecture started really in architecture in many ways. I mean, we both have our bachelors of architecture degrees. Went into school, intending absolutely to take the traditional pathway and participate at firms, many of which you mentioned, and there's many more 3-letter firms out there in the world, and big name architects and so on. So I went to school and fell in love with design, but beyond the scope of architectural education, started to find that there wasn't quite this alignment. Wasn't necessarily the same topics, the same feeling, the same cadence that we were experiencing in our architectural education. And what was interesting was we started to see these moments that architecture began to spill out into other industries, other areas of interest. I think one of the great examples is that an early studio that both Erin and I were in asked us to study birds and to examine their birds' nests and to build homes for people based on, the mechanics or the ecology or the environment or some special character. And it just became really apparent that we could go out into the world as architects, learn pretty much anything that we wanted. Obviously, all architects, we like to think of ourselves as experts, but we're really expert generalists. We're really, really good at learning new things and applying them to other problems. So you get these moments where you start to recognize that your skills are valuable in other contexts, and engaging in that world was really powerful. So beyond the scope of school, we began to have some some inklings that we might be interested in doing things, not necessarily abandoning architecture, but really kind of stretching architecture into other areas. I personally left and began working at a small ed tech startup, and now work for Adidas, which has almost nothing to do with architecture, but uses a lot of the skills and interests that I had in rendering and 3D modeling and computational design and so on. And so when we started this process of transitioning our own careers, we began to have friends and colleagues come to us and start to go, hey, why are you able to do this? Like, how did you do that? Why would they hire someone like you? And so we started to really have to think about that a lot and break that down. And that quickly evolved into many more of those conversations, and then needing to kind of dedicate time and resources to doing that in what has now become a full-fledged business. It is no longer some side project, and has evolved well beyond just the scope of Aaron and myself.
Fascinating. So tell us what the business exactly is. Is it an education platform? What do you guys provide, and how people can benefit from it?
So I think, this is the first time, or you're the first person I think to ever refer to Out of Architecture as a project. And that got me thinking for a second that I think it is a continuing project, actually. It started with consultations. Jake and I joke that one of the reasons we started Out of Architecture is because we're two best friends who happen to live on opposite coasts of a large country. So it was an excuse to spend time together, at least virtually, and complain and try to fix things for ourselves and others. So it started very much as consultations, which we do still do. We offer free intro consultations for people, but we also now have a growing suite of advisors. So it's not just us, people with, amazingly diverse and interesting career paths and backgrounds from all over the globe. And I think we're excited to have that be growing. Jake mentioned that we're no longer just the two of us, but a growing small team. I think by the end of the year, we'll probably be around 10. We're at 8 right now, which is exciting and just completely bonkers if I think about where we were 2 years ago. But we're also beginning to expand the suite in the same way that we've thought about really trying to reach different people and meet different needs. So we host student group workshops. We have an ongoing a growing private community of those who come to speak with us and who want to either mentor or be engaged in some way, or former clients or existing clients who are just looking to expand their network and look for a place to talk. As well as, we host a series of events and go to a series of lectures that look at sort of the strategies and the tactics of how to get out of architecture or somehow adjacent to it, or get something new out of architecture that perhaps you didn't know existed.
I love this. So does all the team work with you on voluntary basis? Do you have some kind of packages or subscription models, something like that, where people can join to be coached in groups or privately? How does it really work?
Yeah, at the level of the product, there's a few different stages, and our clients, span from still being in school and having a curiosity about what they might be able to do with their skills beyond traditional practice, all the way into people who have owned their own practice or business or firm for 30 years, 40 years, even, I kid you not, 50 years. And, for each of those people, it's a different question. Some people are pursuing one-on-one consulting. We start everyone with a kind of, introductory consult, but there is no 10-month program or bi-weekly meetings or anything like that. It's very one-on-one, which is why we've had to expand, because the interest has outgrown Aaron and I's extra time. But for the other kinds of offerings that aren't this individual career consulting, we support clients with negotiation. So we work with clients who have received offers in maybe an area that they haven't worked in before, support them in negotiating the difference with the company, and we take a percentage of just the increase, which is kind of a nice way to work with clients, is to support them and make sure that you only win when they win. We also have these group workshops, as Aaron mentioned, which are focused around early career and those that are still in school, and they typically hinge on a specific topic. So maybe that's portfolio and resumes for roles beyond architecture. Maybe that's a little bit more about networking or storytelling around the work that you do, making those translations between, well, you know, if I'm planning circulation in a building, maybe that's really more, you know, user flow or research, or, you know, trying to expand a little bit beyond just the story that you'd tell in a portfolio interview. We also now have a couple of other products, and I think one of the things that we really noticed was people were hesitant to kind of come to us and either make the admission to themselves, or especially in social media, to make the admission that they were really considering changing their career paths. It's a huge thing to admit. It's a huge thing. And we noticed this super early on, and Aaron and I sat down and started talking about, like, how could we, you know, have these, could we leave secret notes on people's desks and, you know, tell them, like, call me, like, it's okay, you know, or should we go into firms, you know, like dressed as like FedEx delivery people, and then, but like, you know, secretly like ask people, like, do you need help? And what we ended up settling on, the best way to do that was actually just a book, and just to put a book out into the world. So I still like the covert operation, but it's just not sustainable nor legal, really. There's a lot of problems with it. And so we wrote this book, and we ended up writing it, like, I don't know, probably 100 times over. For anyone out there who has actually published, it is a freaking nightmare. But we are so proud of the output. And so the book is called Out of Architecture: The Value of Architects Beyond Traditional Practice. And it touches on quite a lot of topics, but you know, we're really excited that it's actually going to be fully available November 10th on a huge variety of platforms. I was impressed by your being able to tell a narrative without taking a breath, because I actually had to read our audiobook, and that was the most difficult thing, is, okay, trying to get through the sentence, wait to take a breath, okay, then and then keep going. And it's just it takes real skill. It takes real skill and talent, which I do not have, apparently, but we made it through.
Sounds amazing. So you have an audiobook now?
We do.
We do,
which you can listen to and hear Jake's wonderful voice read it to you, which was a completely phenomenal experience to, you know, have such a close friend read me a story that we wrote. So not only did we have to write it so many times, Jake also had to read it out loud about 4 or 5 more times to get that out there. But yeah, I think we wanted something out there for people who unfortunately are really afraid to interact with us. We get a lot of private messages where, you know, people are afraid to even follow us on LinkedIn or on Instagram for fear of who may see that. And I think that role can take on a number of people, right? Your boss, your colleagues, your family, your friends. Architecture, for better or for worse, has the unfortunate circumstance of being a little cult-like sometimes. And we talk about this in the book, and I think we talk about it a lot with our clients, and that community can be very supportive and very welcoming, but it can also be very unforgiving. And I think we're working to really try to change that. And I think part of that starts with, in the title, we say, you know, the value of architects beyond traditional practice, to really focus on the idea of the architect and what that title may mean for individual people, and say that instead of the architectural profession, right? We're preferencing the individual and trying to put a spotlight on everyone's unique talents, passions, and you know, individual capabilities. I like to think that, you know, architecture cannot change the world, right? It's too limited in its capacity, but I do think architects can, right? And so this idea of how do you align what you're passionate about, what you're good at, with how you create agency in the world, and you can pursue to legally, you can choose to pursue to legally get the title architect, or you can take everything that you've built and everything that you've discovered and learned through your education and your professional experience, and really design your own career. And that's a phrase that Jake and I use rather often, because Another issue that we see is people, incredible designers, people who can take something out of nothing or a disparate selection of ideas and turn it into a really rich way to solve a problem or respond to a brief, but have a hard time doing that with their careers, even though it is in fact the same process. It's a suspension of disbelief. It's being okay with not knowing exactly what the end product is going to be and just trusting the process. So we really try, at least in particular in our one-to-one work or one-on-one work, to really help people with that process. And we've been completely humbled by the amount of people who've reached out who also want to be a part of it and want to help. And that's where we're enjoying having our team grow and our ability to have those voices expand and help more people. And the book, I think, is a way to do that with less of a financial burden, and also perhaps with people who are still grappling with this idea of, is this a choice I want to make?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's really interesting that we're having this conversation now, because I had that little reflection on my own life path and career path yesterday, because we just booked flights to Japan out of Bali, and the flight was stopping in Singapore. And I thought about the last time I was there, and it was when I was like 21. I took a gap year out of university, and I went to work in China in my first internship. And there, it was very young, and I kind of was dabbling in modeling at the time. And a lot of the people I was surrounded by were like super devoted into making modeling their career. But because I was at Central St. Martin's, quite a reputable architecture school, and surrounded by that cult-like mentality that you mentioned before, it was unimaginable to me to commit to a path like that, having that sort of, my roots in academia. And I thought that it will just be a disgrace to my life if I wasn't to follow an academic path and really be that sort of intellectualist. But not just that, also have a career that is intellectual. And it was so strongly engraved in me that I actually wasn't able to fully enjoy my time there. I felt like I'm wasting my time doing modeling. And there was a certain level of freedom to that work, because you could just turn around, profit really quickly, enjoy your day, travel, all that stuff. And yet I had such a tremendous judgment on what I was doing, because I wasn't doing the academic work or working in the office or doing an architecture thing. And, from that perspective of academia and intellectualism, this was just a very shallow thing to do. And actually, I wasn't happy in my internship, having to work 9 to 5 and doing a lot of the drafting, and the reality of the work wasn't deeply satisfying. I loved to travel at the time, but I found it really hard to navigate. What it meant to be free somehow, and what it meant to enjoy my life on a daily basis, and be able to somehow satisfy those desires or those ambitions that came from the practice. And I think years later, so I'm 35, so we're really talking about 15 years later, looking back, it took a tremendous amount of effort to actually break those beliefs and simply allow myself to not have to be the academic that I thought I need to be, and have the sort of career I thought I have to have, comparing myself to the best of the best in the industry, like Zaha Hadid, because those were the people that I was following, somehow thinking that's how I need to be as an architect. And that's the only way to be successful in architecture. And it was extremely hard. And I remember the time when I just sort of decided, this is it, I can't anymore. And I actually went to study business. I felt like a failure for 2 years. I mean, I couldn't even talk about who I am and, my path. I couldn't even talk about it. It was so hard to come through my throat. Story, because I had such a strong feeling of failure before I allowed myself to create something new. And now looking back at it, it was the biggest blessing. But I can only appreciate where I'm at today, going through the hardship of leaving. And I don't know why is it so hard. Is it so hard to transition from architecture? And I think it's what we're taught at school, the role models that we have to follow, but also the amount of energy we put into getting that degree. 7 years, BA, MA, PhD, whatnot, and we're just that's what we have to do. So it's so hard to then leave that structure and say, well, yeah, I put 6 years, 7 years of education into it, and now I'm doing something completely different.
Absolutely.
easier to learn in the first place, you know. It's very hard.
No, it's hugely impactful to hear those stories, and I think one of the things that Aaron and I have enjoyed so much about Out of Architecture is hearing stories like that, and then being able to translate them into, you know, supportive commentary for people that are actively going through struggles like that. And Aaron mentioned that we do these half-hour introductory calls for free, and I find that often there is so much value in just giving someone the opportunity to not only reflect on those things, but to push them to really understand that it's okay to explore these topics. And one of the questions we get all the time is someone will come to us with a specific goal. You know, modeling is a good example, but you know, very often it's something focused in technology like UX design, or it's an area like management consulting, or someone wants to go into project management in a certain company and they say, you know, what would my pathway look like if I take this? And Aaron and I always have to stop and say, you know, we don't know what your path is going to look like, but even if we knew what role you were going to take, we still wouldn't know that pathway. And you should look back and reflect on, very often the clients that are coming to us, they have, you know, choreography backgrounds, and then they decided to go to architecture school, or they're coming out of landscape, or they're coming from multiple degrees, or their interests in architecture were super varied. And, you know, I think at this point, Aaron and I are also far enough in our careers that we can say, you know, we have these amazingly nonlinear trajectories, right? And some of them are not just nonlinear, they're parallel. You know, they splay out, they take multiple avenues. That's the beauty of having that sort of trust in yourself, that following what feels, you know, intuitively like a good fit for your skills, what not only gives you monetary value, but that is work that provides value to you, that, you know, the work that you enjoy doing, that you're passionate about. Doing that in the moment is not a failure of, you know, or a missed opportunity of finding some future, right? Because that future is never guaranteed. So it's incredibly important to recognize that, you know, being unhappy now with the idea that you might get to, you know, do something wonderful 10 years from now is very often, you know, not worth it, or not the right choice. And I think we all shy away about talking, you know, about the fact that we might not have the opportunity to experience that future. But every time I look at, you know, something that I'm spending an immense amount of time on, and work is always one of those things, a little part of me thinks, okay, well, if I was going to die doing this, you know, would I be enjoying like the last sort of like part of my life, or am I doing this in service of some, you know, potential long-term gain that may not come? So I think we do have a lot of clients who maybe aren't quite at that level of intensity, but we do have a lot of clients also who are in a kind of crisis of architectural faith. And I think it's really interesting to see them, now that we've been in business so long, to see clients 2 years, 3 years after they make the transition, and to hear their renewed love for design and architecture both in a sort of less, quote unquote, traditionally architectural role. It's pretty powerful and pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I think I just want to say too, like, one of the things we've realized is how important acknowledging those stories are. And I guess I just want to thank you for sharing kind of, you know, you're grappling with that in your path, because I think one of the things that I was not as aware of when we started Out of Architecture, but slowly became much more aware of, is just how many people I think have that same disconnect, right? This feeling like this isn't right, this isn't what I want, but a denial of that intuition, because the culture that I'm in or the place that I'm at, this is what you do, right? And I have the privilege of being able to do this, and it's hard to turn that away. And in a way, I think also we do have to recognize that getting to study and become an architect is in itself, and in some ways a privilege. But that trusting or that denial, I think, of your intuition and what you really want just does really sort of eat away at you in a way that is fundamentally like. I think it's one of the reasons burnout hits architects so hard, because it becomes an identity crisis in a lot of ways. Like we kind of have called this the noun crisis, and similar to what Jake was talking about creating these parallels, which I think you've done too, Sarah, is just like by following all these different passions. Not only is it just architect plus or former architect or recovering architect plus, but you get to collect these nouns that describe all of these things about you that allow you to do the things in the world, physical or digital, that excite you and you're passionate about. And I so strongly wish that more people could hear and feel empowered to tell those stories, because I think at some point you reach a critical mass, and that tends to crush out that culture of no, that's not what we do here. And it's just so unfortunate.
Absolutely. It was extremely hard, and somehow it turned to be like a spiritual path a little bit to self-discovery, I must say, because there was sort of two big frustrations. One was when I realized I can't work for anyone else in architecture, which was like, oh, hell, what am I going to do now? I hate the 9 to 5. I hate the and first in, last out kind of attitude. People sleeping on their desks at the lunch break, not to leave the office. I don't know. I mean, crazy. And also sleepless nights. That was really frustrating. And then kind of also feeling like I want to have a purpose. I want to do something that matters for humanity and environment. So not so much going into like high-tech sustainability, but more like, I want to travel and I work with Indigenous people and preserving natural ways of building. That sort of became a passion. And so I ended up starting a charity, and I was very young doing that. And that was already scary. But then at least I like deep dive into architecture. I told myself I'm building, I'm managing a construction site, managing, Gantt projects and finances and budgets. And so I'm doing architecture. That's great. But then I started to realize I'm not profitable. Like really, I'm actually poor and broke. And I don't know how to navigate through that. I mean, I'm having like the most uncomfortable negotiation moments with clients, potential clients, people expecting a lot of the money to go into construction. And it was just like, how do I even get a penny out of this? First, because I was doing charity. But then when I started to work on private projects, I really didn't know how to price my services. So that was super hard. And at that time, already having a team, I realized I was hitting 30, and I realized, actually by now, 6 years into running a business and having 2 restaurants as well to support paying salaries, not a joke, I thought, okay, I'm going to take a break again and now go study business, because this is ridiculous. I really don't know what I'm doing. I don't have any plan behind what I'm doing, and I'm not being profitable, and I can't imagine myself living like this in my 30s. So another time out, I'm out. And I'm going now to study business and marketing. And it was eye-opening. I mean, I also was frustrated and angry when I started to study business, because I realized how other industries have it easier, because you know what? Those systems were presented to them from the beginning. And there's simple stuff like, I don't know, concepts of your pricing is based on the value you provide. I mean, I never was introduced to concepts like that until I was almost 30, 6 years into business. And it was mind-boggling, to realize that such simple ideas I was struggling with, and the discomfort in negotiations and client conversations that I was holding on to because I didn't know any better. That was super hard, and it went through so much, emotional turmoil. And then, of course, realizing, okay, this is a real pain point here. I mean, not only I'm feeling it, but also a lot of people perhaps already started businesses like me, and they're going through this, how to grow a team, how to find relevant leadership, how to exit, how to start making better money, how to promote yourself, bring better clients, not take on every project that is coming through the door because simply we don't have a choice, those sort of things. And so that's kind of where I started, where it came from, what I'm doing now. But in the process, I also realized that, you know what, those pain points and those struggles and the misfortunes and the anger and all those negative emotions that sort of happened along the way of me comparing myself or trying to be better or trying to be like someone else or whatever in this industry, they were like shameful to me. And I first wanted to hide those stories. And then I realized actually they're like fuel to be who I really am and to show to the world who I am. And maybe if I come out of that shell, start talking about those things and create a business that is around those pain points, maybe it will help me at least breathe better and sleep better at night. And I think I really needed that at some point because the frustration was real. And so it does do wonders when you kind of come out of those bad stories on the other side and you own it. And like right now, I would say all my business is just based on those misfortunes and bad stories. I don't have so many success stories from being an architect as those pain points and frustrations that I speak about. But somehow the business that I'm doing now with Disrupt Symposium and the platform and publications and interviews and constant conversations with people in the industry and out of the industry about those topics of business, it just helped me own those parts of me that were uncomfortable before. And that's beautiful because then you come to like your authenticity and like creating businesses in any way, whether in architecture or outside, through that process of like owning yourself and being authentic to who you are and genuinely being able to present to that story. It's wonderful. And I think that that's the sort of, that's what it's all about, that journey, unpacking what feels really uncomfortable to us. And it is a real wall to climb, I feel, realizing that you're not happy in this industry. So this process is really just going through it. And, you know, and it's so real in so many ways. And I think I really appreciate what you guys are doing because, like you said, people being afraid perhaps to follow you on LinkedIn, and you really confront that because it really hurts. Somehow that process.
Yeah. It does. I think, you know, this idea of unpacking that discomfort, you know, hit home with me so hard because there's a lot of that happens within the book. And the context of this is that we went through this education and what we did was we went back to a lot of these stories, these elements, these moments of failure, you know, times where Erin and I showed up to a very early, very real client meeting while we were still in school with no working drawings that depicted the construction process, right? That were entirely conceptual. And the moments of finding out the disparate expectations of designer and client, or times where we, you know, were totally unprepared to negotiate, or where we found ourselves in uncomfortable circumstances that were related to unspoken norms or, you know, sort of things that most people might point to and say, well, that's obvious, but that as a young designer, you sort of hang your hat on. Like we take for granted how many firms say, you know, that they are like a family, right? And I think that sense of family is manufactured completely by the number of hours you spend together and really not in any way justifiable based on one's love for, you know, their colleagues or bosses. And so there's a lot of that as sort of the first portion of the book, is really the tale of falling in love with and falling out of love with architecture. And rather, I guess the falling out of love part is really just a reconciling, not so much a hate of the profession, which I don't think, you know, either of us truly harbor, but this understanding that what most people love about architecture is a small portion of the professional world. And how can you sort of identify what those elements are and then look out in the world and find where else they exist. And so we took a few sort of archetypal, I love that word in the context of architecture, but, you know, archetypal clients and talked about their stories. And so in the third part of the book, we have 5 different clients who we tell a little bit about their pathway, where they are in their career, some of these emotions and feelings that have caused them to get to this point, whether it's simply, you know, financial, whether it's about the ethics of projects that they're doing, whether it's a a question that they really haven't resolved for themselves. Frankly, a lot of people come to us in this complete state of skepticism, withholding the true nature of their feelings because they just haven't actually made that realization. I think it's so funny that the term also that became the name of the company, Out of Architecture, so many people see it as this kind of one-liner that we're just like asking people or teaching them how to leave the profession. And sometimes we are. And that's great. And we welcome you to leave architecture if that's the best pathway for you. But I just wanted to point back to what Aaron said, which is sometimes it's just getting something new out of architecture, like getting to a new portion, recognizing what it is you bring with you out of architecture or want to keep with you as you make some next transition. So it's a curious narrative to tell. And I don't think, as anyone listening to this would imagine, a book is not necessarily the answer for your problems. But I think what's really powerful in it, and what I would hope people would get out of it, is a kind of commiseration and an understanding that, we've put very personal stories, both of ourselves and our clients, and my wife Rachel also is kind of one of our. We joke that we were all our first clients, and so she's now off running a vineyard, and we've all taken these completely tangential pathways, and our personal narratives and hardships and so on, I think will be relatable to so many architects and young architects and students, and hopefully give them a little bit of fuel to approach those problems differently, something that you might not have had at the age of 21, looking around at your colleagues and feeling every one of these people wants to do true architecture. Why do I feel so disparate? Why do I feel so different? Why do I feel so isolated? Maybe I'm not getting it. And so,
or maybe they're all hiding
hopefully
it.
This is a bridge. Yeah. Or maybe they're all hiding it, which we've found out is pretty common.
Yeah, and I think also you touch on, I think, very much the struggle of architects are, some architects, not all, but architects are incredibly well set up from a mindset standpoint to be an entrepreneur in terms of like being okay to try things and fail. That's what the design process is, right? Iterating and being really comfortable in that. And yet we get no training, at least. So I'll speak kind of in the US model, because that's what we were trained in. But, you look at the professional training of doctors, lawyers, they take classes in how actually one manages practice, not in the same way that one would do getting an MBA. And we highly recommend that for literally everyone. Jake and I have done it as well. And it was incredibly eye-opening, right? To start to understand how money is a tool, just like CAD is a tool, right? Debt, financing, capital, how you handle all of that, obviously, is just another way that you can design your career and design your business. And I think we would have so much more innovation, both in the field, tangential to the field, and out of the field, if more architects got that training earlier on and could start to synthesize both, the pain points within the profession, within the education system, as well as, aligning that with the skills that they cultivate and the passions that they have. But we're hamstringed from the start, because if you have to go get a whole nother degree and you look at the actual finances of that on top of your potentially BArch and MArch, it becomes wholly inefficient and perhaps unattainable. But having more business acumen or more ways to study or talk about profit, finances, bookkeeping, accounting, efficiencies would be so useful, and I think be so helpful for the way we think.
Yeah, it would. And also, I think what's really interesting is that this sort of design process that we learn to implement, it is so useful for a lot of life skills that you can implement in other businesses. I mean, you name it, the process of how we come to create something that doesn't exist in the first place by being able to gather information, analyze, understand, and then propose something new and test it and eventually implement it through also a very hard, long, patient, expensive process of building, where you need to involve so many teams and so many experts. And really, it's on many levels mathematical as it's conceptual and ethereal in the same time. And therefore, we actually are equipped with a tremendous amount of soft skills to go and design or create anything, businesses, our own lives, for that matter. Often skilled in writing and being well spoken and good in presentations, which, if you start a tech business, for example, that's how you get money. You just go out there, present to venture capitalists and angel investors. And, it's just what we do at school when we present our work in crits, to our teachers. It's exactly the same. And when I started to first study business, I saw how many of those skills apply. But then also I started to coach and mentor at many, Founders Institute, mobility labs, where basically new companies were being formed, and they were doing that. They were pitching, they were training how to pitch their ideas, their products, overcoming obstacles, seeing what could be an issue in the future, how could they overcome it. It's all what we do in architecture, and yet somehow we really struggle with those basic things. And when I speak of struggle, it's not that I'm assuming that everyone is going through the same emotional turmoil. I see that on people's websites. I see that on LinkedIn. The way you describe yourself, the way you communicate your value, the way you communicate about your practice, it's something that other people can pick up on really easily. And if you don't have a very cohesive message of who you are, for example, how you change the world, what you do. I see that so often working with people also through consultancy. People come in with already established practices, and they have struggle with actually communicating what is it that they do, or how they change, how they help their clients really, or how they change things. Those simple skill sets somehow we really struggle to apply into business. And I think that it's really costs us money, it costs us energy and unhappiness. And so being able to somehow also realize that everything that we have learned can be applied to other things as well, and that sort of confidence perhaps to do that is what is missing, I feel, but would be super helpful for people to realize that, like, I already have the skills. Actually, I already have the skills to start a new business, or to apply that to something new.
It's completely true. No, and it's so important for architects to realize that there's so much more than just designers of buildings. I really believe that. We have been in the process of trying to document these stories in several ways. And hopefully one of those ways coming out in not too long will be the format of a podcast. And I think that some of those stories are extremely interesting, but the reason I bring that up is less so to focus on the format and more to focus on one of the questions at the end, which is what does being an architect mean to you? And I find that it has such a deep relationship to the trouble that you outlined of what are people's goals? Like, what do they want to accomplish through being an architect? What does it actually give them as a platform, as a profession that maybe they, can't find anywhere else? But very frequently, I think we get people to this point that they realize that architecture is actually preventing them from doing that thing that they really are truly passionate about to its fullest. And your story about realizing that you no longer wanted to be involved in the 9-to-5 reminds me so much of Erin sitting here as she just said, I just don't think I can work for anyone else if I'm going to do architecture. And we've seen a bunch of clients go through that as well. And it's kind of empowering, not that you need to go and start your own firm. I mean, certainly, I am working a very rigid corporate 8-to-5 job. And what I love about that is just the immense variety of topics that I get to touch on a daily basis, surrounding fabrication and oh my gosh, it could be, supply chain or e-commerce or virtualization or digital products or, and then with the ability to take those learnings and apply them into work advising startups or meeting with clients or, any of those things. I mean, that variety was something that I was explicitly told I could not find in an architecture firm. I actually had an interview with an architecture firm in Boston, and when I presented my portfolio, they were like, the job you're looking for does not exist. So I was like, okay. And I did find it, but I will not name that firm here, although I have in other places, because I just found out that a friend of mine is working there. So I won't go too hard on them.
Respect. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I find it really interesting because at university we did some project with UNESCO, and they sent us to Palestine, and it was like it was a competition. The idea was to revitalize an old town of Birzeit, but we had to find ways to do that, and it was like a hard political context, and because obviously of occupation, and then religiously it was hard because women and men didn't mix in one place, so therefore they had to have separate entries and exits, and they don't hang out, so you needed to really invent programming out of blue to be able to make it happen. And all that stuff is such an intensely hard context to work in, and yet we were sent there as students without an idea of an outcome, just to find the problem in the first place that you're going to solve through your project, and then actually design the project fully and propose a solution to a problem that you were, the problem was so complex. And we were able to thrive in this environment as students, some coming up with very conceptual projects, very poetical projects, some with more functional. But I find that to be a great analogy of how life is, and an ability to sort of navigate through your own passions and your own no and your own pull towards a yes in the world that we live in. How are you going to apply your skill set and your belief system to the world, and then somehow add value and turn it into a profit and a life for yourself? And in a way, it's exactly the same. I mean, we're oversaturated by information and problems, and finding something that you're truly passionate about, turning it into a project, getting people to believe it, market it, and sell that. It is really what business is. Like that's what starting a business is. And I'm not saying everyone has to start a business, but like we do that with every project, like going there, trying to understand exactly what's needed and then applying it. And yet we struggle to do that for ourselves. And I think that the main problem is that tremendous brainwash.
No, absolutely.
Sarah, I think you should come advise with us. I think you should come.
Yeah, I think it'd be great.
I already had that thought. I'm super passionate about this. Very passionate, and I'm living it. And I love having these conversations. I'm actually really looking forward to reading your book.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely gonna order one copy for myself or listen to the audiobook, which I love audiobooks actually. But yeah, no, it's a great topic really, and I think that many people, and I think the message is you don't have to leave architecture. I mean, I didn't at the end of the day. I'm still in it.
Likewise.
Yeah, me too. And yet, I don't know, somehow I feel so much more fulfilled. And the funny thing is, people always say, and I see people ask the same questions to like Amanda Ferber, who owns Architecture Hunter. So you don't design anymore. You don't design anymore. It's like, yeah, at the moment I don't. Yet it doesn't change the fact that I'm still a designer. And like even now traveling in Bali, I'm in this villa, and over COVID, the villa right next door just got deteriorated. I mean, I think they had a leak in the roof, and it's all destroyed. And I went in, I wandered in, and I was just imagining what I would do. And I actually contacted the owner, asking, how much would it be to get into business with him to renovate that place and start getting like, I don't know, get into real estate, whatever. It's my skill set as an architect can apply to so many things. I feel I'm still an architect. I don't call myself an ex-architect. I'm still an architect, and all it takes is just a project, an interesting project for me to step back into. Of course, I'll be designing. I know how to do it. I do it well. I love doing it. I just didn't want to do it for any other reason. Right now, my passion's here. But if the right moment comes along, hell yeah, I'm jumping right into it because the skill set I know how to do, I love doing. And so it's like, I think with more freedom, flowing through life. If a right moment comes along, I will certainly keep designing, but yeah, and I think that gives also freedom of not seeing yourself as like, oh, you're out of it now. You're never gonna do that again. No, it's not true. Of course I will. I am an architect still, and so
Freedom.
that's super liberating, I think, to think of it like that.
No, I think the way you're putting it, and this idea of liberation and freedom is really the crux of it. There's a lot of talk now about, like, it's not even so much about compensation; it's about your time is the most valuable thing that you have, which I for the most part really do agree with. But I was speaking with a bunch of students last night, and they were asking questions, and I think they started to realize at a certain point that I was just getting more and more honest with them about my path and good things that have happened and bad things. And at some point, I was with my partner in my design business, and he said something along the lines of like, wow, you're on tap tonight, like you're just sort of letting it go. And I just realized, actually I just have nothing to lose at this point, because I love what I do. If people are interested in it, I love to talk about it. If it bothers anyone, I actually don't care.
Yeah.
And to have gotten to that point, I think part of it is the work that we do with clients and realizing how many people have also suffered, and kind of allowing myself to not feel guilty. But that freedom that you talk about, to say that, no, I can go in and out of design in the same way I can go in and out of so many other talents that I have, and the ability to open yourself up and then walk into a space and say, you know what, I would love to work on this, and then use your problem solving skills to say, let me find the owner and see how we can actually make that a reality. Like, that is using all of the skills it takes to be an architect, to problem solve in the world, to make the place around you better, right? That is success. Categorically, unequivocally, that is success. And the fact that we don't talk about that as being equally as impressive or as exciting as some glitzy new tower that went up just genuinely bothers me.
Yeah. And also, I think, what was really liberating to me personally was stepping into all these different projects, especially now doing sort of architectural media, organizing this event, how a different price tag is attached to value with the different projects, So, the Strap Symposium basically bases itself on being sponsored by companies that are looking for exposure. And then the smaller percentage of it is the ticket sales. And so doing that and earning money in a completely different way than I would as a designer was really liberating, to also attach value and see, that sort of action can bring a bigger result, a faster turnaround, I don't know, good money flow, whatever, whilst this is patient and long, all that stuff. And so those different aspects of how income can be generated can really also show you more about yourself and your personality, and like your gratification sort of, measure. I think architecture is really expecting us to be patient. I'm not a patient person. I struggled with that before. And so I do actually better with projects that I can turn around faster. And, it's interesting because the more you get into, like, diversify all these projects, and the more you get into the different income sources, you start realizing, actually, I love selling books because that's like a residual a year that maybe I'm not noticing, but it comes around and like gratifies me at the end of the year. And then I love, doing this because it's like a really quick gratification process. And then maybe an investment or, a crypto investment, whatever, but like diversification. And that's the only thing that I got after I started to study business. I didn't have that in architecture. So I have all these different skills to apply in life, but an ability to kind of think about income and investment and profitability and planning forward and all that stuff, that only came in my 30s when I started to study business. So I think I do encourage people really to sort of step out of comfort zones and see that, because it's beautiful, and it gives freedom, it gives more breadth and an ability to kind of, okay, yeah, I'm going to devote to all these different things because of the different value patterns that they have. It's fascinating, actually, and being able to play with business, but it requires a little bit of education, a little bit of stepping outside of your comfort zone as well.
Absolutely. No, it's in short, I think people fail to see that the best designers are also the best salespeople. business developers. Every time someone gives me a comment or, and they say, well, oh yeah, you do. So you're a designer. And I say, no, not in the traditional sense. And they're, oh, and you can tell there's one of two reactions. They either sort of think they pity you that you don't, have your hand, pen to paper all the time, or they sort of just kind of dismiss, oh, okay, well, you're not involved in design. But the intersection where design creates business opportunity is where these ideas flourish most, because without any kind of client, without any kind of funding, as much as I dislike, Rem Koolhaas for some reasons, he actually has a very beautiful quote about the reliance of architecture on the client, right? And that one can't really exist without the other. Bjarke Ingels also, in that way, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say stylistically he's the best designer, but people think of him as a designer because he's had created the opportunity to make so many projects, to build so many things. I have still many classmates and colleagues who are in, their 10th, 12th year in architectural practice and consider themselves to be an architectural designer. I would wager that in my 5 years in footwear, I've put at least 30 times the amount of projects to market that any of them have. Partly because of the duration, but I think, it's equally as interesting to have 30 million people wearing something on their feet that you've gotten to, participate in shaping and forming. And whether I actually drew that silhouette, to me, is less important than the, solutions, designing some of the solutions to the problems. Or so I think that designers have an interesting connection to the visual, but I think they need to let some of that go and let some other things take its place a little bit.
Yeah, definitely architects have an ego. It's a little bit of this like godlike mentality, like creating the projects and putting your own name on it. I mean, it's super interesting, all of this. There's so many different directions to take in this conversation. I'm looking forward to reading your book, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. In summary, where do people go to find out more about you, potentially book in a session or to read your book?
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you so much for this. This has been a wonderful conversation. And if anyone wants to continue it, you can head to outofarchitecture.com. There you'll find ways to schedule time with us. You'll find a shop where you can buy some Out of Architecture swag, including the book. And you can also check out, we'll be launching our audiobook soon through Audible. Yeah, I mean, Sarah, this has been an incredibly enlightening conversation. I feel like we could probably chat for hours. But I would second Jake's comment. We should have more conversations. And if you were interested in coming on as an advisor, I think you've got an amazing story. So good luck with the symposium. It also sounds amazing. Yeah, great. Awesome. Love it.
Thank you. Awesome.
Thanks so much for having us, Sarah.
Awesome. Thank you. So before we wrap up, good day. Before we wrap up, a quick reminder that Disrupt Symposium is coming up in less than 5 days. Go to disruptsymposium.com to get your tickets. We have an incredible lineup, and we're going to be talking about practice operations and what substitutes success in architecture. And really, it's about mindsets. It's about strategies and decisions. So a very interesting format. We do spend a lot of time and effort to communicate with speakers. It's not just TED-style presentations, but we also have Q&As where everyone can ask a question. We have discussions. We find that really important to have those conversations and support given. So that's the format of Disrupt. Join to be a part of it. Disruptsymposium.com. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jake and Erin, again for joining this incredible podcast. And I'll see you all really soon.
Bye, Sarah.